Coronavirus in Kazakhstan. Let me tell you about everything that happened in the past 2 months in Kazakhstan and the aftermath. Let me go over the timeline of everything that happened over the 2 months, and I'm gonna start from everything that happened since January. As we all know, coronavirus started back in December and January, and back then we didn't have any cases in Kazakhstan, obviously, and on the 25th of January we had 98 students in Wuhan. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that was where the virus started, and we had 98 students from Kazakhstan there locked up, and they were not able to leave the country. And our embassy was trying to do everything they could to get them back, and they did it eventually. On the 26th of January, we canceled the visas for Chinese people who were coming from China. Usually had their 72-hour visa-free regime. They could just come in and be here for a couple days. But on the 26th of January, that was canceled. The 8th of January, we had about 1,300 citizens of Kazakhstan in Hainan. That's actually a very popular tourist place for Kazakh citizens, and they were being evacuated from there, and we had about 600 of them being as tourists. And actually on that date, the 98 students were evacuated too. On the 20th of February, the government introduced the ranking system for the countries where people were coming from. For example, if China was ranked as A because that it had more cases, and South Korea was in there, and then it changed to Europe, and if you were coming from A and B countries, as they ranked them, you were supposed to be on quarantine for 14 days. Usually you were either taken to a hospital or you were supposed to do quarantine in your own home. On March 10th, the funniest thing happened. We had the chief medical officer, whose last name was Bekshin. He actually predicted that coronavirus was supposed to come to Kazakhstan. He actually said it in a very funny way that became a meme in Kazakhstan. He said, "The coronavirus is finally coming to Kazakhstan," and it was just so ridiculous to hear for everybody. But that's what he said, and he said it's gonna finally come from March 11th to March 16th. And the next day we had 3 cases already. To that point, we don't actually know when coronavirus started in Kazakhstan, when we had the first cases, because we didn't have that many tests. We couldn't confirm them, and the government, they were not really willing to confirm that there were cases, because as they said, as soon as we have a case, we're going to do something about it. And that sounded ridiculous, but some people say very interesting things. On March 12th, all the movie theaters and regular theaters were canceled and closed. And that's actually funny because that was the last day when I heard about it, and me and my friends went to a movie theater, and we watched the worst movie ever, but it was fun because we knew that everything is going to be closing. It did happen the next day. Also that day, we learned from the president that all of the public celebrations are going to be canceled. So that was March 12th, and on March 22nd, we were supposed to have our new year, which is called Nauruz. And it's very big for Turkic cultures, for Turkic countries, and it's celebrated in Pakistan, Afghanistan, in Turkey, in a lot of those countries. And for us, it's very important, and having to cancel that kind of celebration was very sad, but that's what we had to do, and everybody conformed. But also another big celebration that was canceled that day was the Victory Day, which is also very big in post-Soviet countries because we lost about 20 million people to World War II, and that was a huge accomplishment for us together with United States and England to win the war. We celebrated to this day. We have the veterans. We cherish that victory, and there's a lot of events happening that day. We take the veterans to the parade, and it's just a huge thing, and it was all canceled, which was very sad because my own grandfather was really waiting for that day to come. He wanted to go to the park where usually that parade is celebrated. He wanted to wear his uniform, and he's 93, and for him to cancel that kind of celebration was a big deal because he doesn't have that many things going on. So that was sad, but we had to do that to save lives. A few days after we were told that the coronavirus is going to be coming to Kazakhstan, we had the first 3 cases, and 2 of them came from Germany, 2 citizens from Kazakhstan, and 1 person came from Italy. They felt fine, which was very surprising. They didn't have any symptoms, but they did have positive results. March 15th, we had a very major thing happen. Our president announced the state of emergency for the entire country, and that meant that we were going to go on quarantine, but that happened a few days later on March 19th. Following that, on March 16th, Kazakhstan suspended all the transportations like bus and trains to countries like China, Uzbekistan, and everything around Kazakhstan mostly, but not to Russia and Kyrgyzstan. Russia and Kyrgyzstan was limited. And funny thing about that, we had one event on March 14th for our family, and that was near Kyrgyzstan, and we have one relative in Kyrgyzstan, and he usually would cross the border with his ID, but this time they asked for a passport, and he didn't have his passport with him, and he couldn't come to our event, and that was like very unexpected because we didn't look up like the rules that changed, and our relative could not come to the event. And at that time on March 16th, we already had 10 confirmed cases. March 17th, nothing happened, but we already had 33 cases confirmed. On March 18th, our general prosecutor announced that if you were to break the rules of quarantine or maybe like infect other people, you could be put in jail for up to 15 days. March 19th is actually the date, as I said before, when the quarantine started, and we locked down the biggest cities, Astana and Almaty, Astana being Nur-Sultan. And that day, everything was canceled. All the entrances to the city and exit out of the city were closed. There were like roadblocks and military, and everybody was checked for their IDs, and nobody was allowed to go through the border. March 20th, we already have 41 cases, and the worst part, the virus started spreading through the entire country, not just the 2 biggest cities. All of the expats that were in Kazakhstan who had their visas expired or maybe like permits expired, they were allowed to stay for 1 more month until April 20th, and that was nice for the government to do, and I think they had to do that. The cities were locked down not just by the transportations on the cars and trains, but also with air, and all of the flights were canceled to and out of the city unless it was like something diplomatic or, you know, the food delivery and things like that. March 26th, we had the first case when somebody died from the virus. That day, everything was closed, including the malls. Everything except grocery stores and pharmacies was closed, including the big shopping malls and everything like that. March 28th, more limitations were introduced to the country and to the quarantine. People were not allowed to gather if there are more than 3 people, and public transportation was limited. March 30th, April 5th, all the organizations, it doesn't matter what kind of activity they had, were canceled, and they couldn't go to work anymore, except for central government bodies, mayor's office, law enforcement office, healthcare organizations, media, and grocery stores and pharmacies, and life support organizations. April 20th, it was a temporary suspension of visa-free regime for a lot of the countries. As you know, or you might not know, a lot of the countries were able to come to Kazakhstan for a few days, or maybe actually 30 days period, and they didn't have to get the visa, but on April 20th, that was canceled because of the virus, obviously. On April 28th, state of emergency was extended until May 11th, and everybody was sad about that, but we didn't do anything about it because we know that we have to follow the rules and save as many lives as possible. Also, I wanted to mention that when we had cases that were found in some kind of apartment complexes in Almaty or Astana, Nur-Sultan, that entire building was locked from entering and from exiting from, and there was police. They would just go around and disinfect the building, and a lot of people were complaining about that, but that was very, I don't know if that had an effect, but that's what people did, and a lot of the different neighborhoods and areas in 2 different cities were shut down like that, and that was one of the very harsh measures that the military took to fight the virus. On May 11th, the state of emergency was over, and right after that, on May 18th, everything was opened in Nur-Sultan. A lot of the restaurants and cafes were open. On May 20th, the shopping malls were open, and also sauna houses were open. For Almaty, everything is supposed to open on May 25th. So today is May 21st and I was able to actually travel from Almaty to Nur Sultan. I'm gonna show you what that experience was like. We were wearing masks, I was wearing gloves, I had my glasses on. In an airplane, seat right next to me was empty and I felt like a lot of the measures were taken, and even at the waiting areas, a lot of the places were marked where you could sit, not right next to the other person, but actually from a distance, which was good, and I was glad to see that, and everybody was wearing masks. Another effect of quarantine is that you might have heard about Italy with the river in Venice being very clean, and they have fish and everything in there. So for us, we had a similar effect in Almaty because Almaty had the worst air possible. It had a very huge smog. It was just very dirty. Because of quarantine, the air cleared up and you could actually walk in the middle of the city and be able to breathe fresh air, because a lot of the people who wanted to get some fresh air, they would have to climb to the mountains and do that. Another actually news that I heard about the effect of quarantine is that wildlife came back to Almaty. For example, snow leopards or something like that came back, and that was very fascinating. And if you haven't seen my quarantine vlog, I was talking about the speculation with masks and sanitizers and everything for being able to protect you from virus. There was some speculation and a lot of the people were trying to sell the masks for very high prices, and eventually the government found out about it and made a strict fine if you were selling it for very high prices. So that was very nice. Also, how the government helped, they, aside from doing the quarantine measures and limiting people from going to different places and gathering together, the government actually helped with a little bit of monetary support. I know it's not that much, it's actually about $100 for a person in a month, and that was actually 2 times they paid for everyone, and that's 42,500 tenge. I did talk about that in my last vlog, so you should watch that in the cards above. But basically you could easily apply through Telegram bot or an SMS, and very easily apply through some online services, and they were just like depositing that amount into your checking account, which was really nice and helpful. But we know it's not that much money, and people still were probably starving from the quarantine measures because they couldn't work, they couldn't support their families. I feel like having to expire state of emergency was very necessary because people started to work, people started to earn money, and if they didn't do that, maybe there would have been some kind of boycott or something very bad. Another funny thing that happened over the quarantine, there was a song that was made for the virus, and it's called actually Coronavirus No No No, something like that, and you're gonna hear that in a second. And the second thing that happened with that song is that we had this tradition before every wedding where the bride comes to the groom's house and shows her face to all of the relatives of the groom. And that's actually a very beautiful and interesting tradition, and I'm gonna cover that in my other videos. But at that ceremony, somewhere in some kind of village, somebody did that, and they gathered during quarantine, and that was actually not allowed, and somebody actually filmed that. And send it over the messages, and that's how it leaked into the social media. And the government actually learned about that case, and they took the guy that was playing that song to jail for 15 days or something like that. And that was funny but also sad, because people did not follow the rules, people didn't conform, and that was actually sad that they didn't do that, because we're all fighting to save lives and nobody cares, right? And also with that case, the government found out about different gatherings and celebrations in the cities, and they had to fine people for that because that was against the rule, and there were a number of cases like that. Also, another thing that the government did to help fight the virus, to help the doctors actually who were suffering at the front of that virus, there was some kind of gradation for those who are in the very middle of things fighting the virus. They were receiving, if they were infected with the disease, they were supposed to be receiving about 850,000 tenge, which is about this amount of money in dollars. I'm not sure how they separate those people, but there's actually a medium type of danger for some of the doctors, and that would be about 425,000 tenge, and not very risky, like medium risk would be 212,000 tenge. So there was some compensation for those doctors who did get infected by the disease, which is good, and I'm hoping that a lot of people who got infected did receive their money. Also, during quarantine, I went to the grocery store, and I'm going to show you that experience right now. Finish on May 11th. They're going to open the city, but right now there's not even police raiding the city, because we're allowed to go out, we're allowed to go to like shopping centers, but keeping in mind social distancing, of course. Basically, you had to wear masks, and they were checking your temperature at the entrance, but that was it. And everybody was trying to practice social distancing, and but also the cashiers looked like they're from space. They had that entire outfit. They were in white robes and masks and gloves and everything. So that was very interesting to see. But other than that, that was like regular shopping for me, and I would get everything that I need from there and go back home. And I would drive to that shopping mall and get everything I need and go back home. And at the entrance of the grocery store, they had the sanitizers, and I could easily sanitize my hands, which was nice. And yeah, that was my experience. This is what it looked like. Also, right now, when everything opened in Astana, people actually started to go out a lot. A lot of people go to restaurants and cafes, and also we are in the middle of Ramadan right now. People are fasting, and they're usually held, dinners for people who are fasting, and a lot of the restaurants would hold those dinners for people who are fasting, and that's actually usually at a certain time. And at that time, people are not advised, if you're not fasting, don't go there, because you're going to be waiting for your meal for forever. A lot of traffic jams are now in the city, so it's not like quarantine when nobody was in the streets, and people are walking in the parks, going out, and the only thing that's not open right now is maybe like movie theaters. But yeah, for the most part, everything opened, and people are enjoying that. But also, I feel like everybody's now more educated about social distancing, sanitizing and self-hygiene, so people are practicing that better. I mean, we had to get adjusted to that reality, so we're finally gradually doing that. Alright, that's everything that I wanted to share with you in this video. I'm gonna keep you in the loop with everything that happens in Kazakhstan concerning the virus, because I'm sure there's gonna be more coming. So yeah, stay tuned, and don't forget to like that video and subscribe. Bye bye! If you want to see what apartment I currently live in, you can actually click here. And I also made a tour of the oldest shopping mall in Astana, so you can click here.